Hey everyone, today we are going to take a look at the Supro Delta King 12. This is a great little 15-watt tube amp from Supro that's inspired by a vintage design but has some modern features. We're going to run it through a bunch of different tones with several different guitars, really see what it can do, and stay tuned to the very end when I am going to turn it all the way up. Let's get started with some tone here. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, the Delta King 12. This is the biggest of the Delta series, and they're, again, modern take on a classic design, and there's a lot that this little amp can do. This is something that kind of directly goes up against other amplifiers in the price range that are suited to blues players, if you kind of smell what I'm stepping in there. This is a great competitive amplifier, and one of the things that impresses me about this one that also impressed me very much about its predecessor, which was the Blues King, is the incredible versatility you get from this amplifier. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the features and some of the different ways you can dial it in. We're going to try it out with a bunch of different tones. I do want to say thank you to Supro for sending this over so that I could bring you all this video. So everyone, big thanks to Supro. So one of the things that immediately stands out to me on these amplifiers is the tone stack. You have such a vast range of your EQ because there aren't a lot of harsh frequencies. So when there aren't harsh frequencies where you really need to find a sweet spot, you can dial it in all kinds of different ways. Most notably, of course, the thing that stands out to me on this is the bass knob on this particular amp. The bass knob on these amps I look at as a size knob, and what I mean by that is you can turn the bass all the way up and it doesn't get muddy or boomy. You can turn it all the way off and it's not completely useless. It almost is like if you turn the bass all the way up, it sounds like a bigger amp. If you turn the bass all the way off, it sounds like one of those small little vintage studio amps that they used to just crank to get a lot of the classic tones. And they're really usable tones, and of course then anything in between. So right there, that stands out as, all right, they've got a good kind of handle on their EQ. Same goes for the mids and the treble. You can really push the mids and the treble, and of course with any tube amp, if you push the treble all the way up, you're going to probably get some brightness more than you need. But that being said, there weren't really these like really harsh overtones and things that just sounded unpleasant. It was just really bright if you turn the treble all the way up. But nevertheless, you have a good range on all of those knobs. I do want to mention real quick, again, it has a volume and a master volume, again, kind of like other amps of its style. You look at them as like gain and volume, right? So volume is like your gain, master is like your volume. If you look at it, if you turn the volume all the way up and then you turn the master up, it's like it's on full drive. If you turn the master up higher and then use the volume more as a standard volume, then it's more your clean, kind of acting like a regular amp. And I did find on other amps I haven't liked that approach because it tends to raise the noise floor, and on this amp I found that that actually still works pretty well. If you want a nice clean tone, turn the master way up and then use the volume as volume. But it also sounds convincing with its drive tones at lower volumes when you blend those. Of course, one of the things that stands out also are the boost and the drive switches on this amplifier. What's cool about this, you could look at it two different ways. You could look at it as if it has built-in pedals, or you could look at it as if it were a channel switching amp, which it's really not. But with those two features, it really gives you a lot of textures that are foot switchable that you can dial in. The boost, I'd look at that like it's an aggressive clean boost that's built in. It's an FET boost, and imagine you had a boost pedal that had a volume and a drive knob. If you ever played a boost pedal like that, it's not like it gives you a ton of drive on its own, but it really gives you a nice edge of grit, really fattens up your signal. And of course, if you get the amp up to gig volumes and a little bit beyond, it really adds some drive. The drive switch is the Pigtronix Fat Tone, and that is like hitting it with an overdrive or distortion pedal. That really gets to some searing gain. Now, that's one of the things that I noticed tonally is quite different from its predecessor, the Blues King. The Blues King had almost more of like a fuzzy kind of fuzz tone to it when you hit those knobs. This one, especially if you hit that drive knob and you really boosted it, it almost was, I thought, giving like brown sound kind of tones. And really cool versatility, and kind of slightly off the beaten path for what I was expecting, but a really cool tone. Now, there was a lot of harmonic richness, so I did experience some feedback with it. So just FYI, if you're going to use the drive switch, just be careful, and you might hear that in some of the clips coming up, that it can feedback. It's got a lot of rich saturation that can give you feedback depending on what guitar you're using, depending on what room you're in. Now, pros and cons. It's a great amp. I love the styling. The styling is something that they seem to go a little further with since the Blues King. I thought the Blues Kings looked great. They were in that kind of matte black finish. The Delta King, they have in two different finishes. This one's obviously the tweed with the black racing stripes. They also have a black one with white racing stripes. They look really great. It's lightweight, it's under 30 pounds. It's a little bit smaller than other amps in its style. Very easy to carry around, and it's loud. It's very loud. I've already gotten the opportunity to play this in a band setting, and let me tell you, if you're using the boost and the drive, you can absolutely bury a band with this amp. I mean, this thing is surprisingly loud. Not in a, all of a sudden peels the paint off kind of way, but just in a very present, powerful, aggressive way. That being said, I noticed that mostly if you use some combination of the boost and the drive. If you want a clean tone live, you probably will need to mic it up unless you're playing in a more quiet band. So keep that in mind. Now, I think with an amp like this, most people are going to get it for at least an edge of breakup tone. It's kind of the point of little amps like this. It has a nice clean tone, so I'm not going to say you don't. Most people aren't going to get this amp for its clean tone. That's not, again, not disparaging against its clean tone. It has a beautiful clean tone, but you get amps like this to push them and to get a natural classic overdrive at a more reasonable volume. So keep that in mind. If you're looking at it as a clean amp, you might need to be in a position where you mic it up. Also, real quick, I do want to mention, it's Blues King 12. The 12 refers to the speaker. It's a 15-watt amp. It has a 6L6, it has a 12AX7, it also has reverb, but it is a 15-watt amp as opposed to a 12-watt amp. So let's dive back in and play some tones and really hear what you're talking about. If you've already heard it a little bit, clean and overdriven, I'm using 3 different guitars in this video: an SG Classic loaded with Singletone A6 P90s, a Fender Stratocaster loaded with Lust for Tone 64 Lustcasters, and a Gibson ES345. So we're going to jump back in and show you a little bit on how versatile it can be using the boost and the drive knobs, and I'm going to use it on kind of an edge of breakup sound, and then hit the boost, then switch it from the boost to the drive, and then do the boost and the drive together. So let's check out how all these tones sound. All right, now we're going to go for some blues tones, so let's just go on to a great classic Stratocaster type blues tone. Now, I mentioned the bass being like a size knob, so let's kind of put that to practice. We're going to use the ES345 and go for a clean bluesy tone. Now, I have the boost on to give myself a little bit extra volume, but then I have the master up higher and the volume turned back a little bit, and a generous amount of reverb so you can hear the reverb a little bit too. So you're going to hear first with the bass all the way up for a more modern, kind of well-rounded, full blues tone. Then we're going to pull the bass all the way back, and it gets a really cool, kind of squishy, more trebly blues tone, really reminiscent of some of the old great blues players. So hear how different but great these two tones sound just based on the bass knob. Now, in that same vein, we're going to go back to the SG Classic and go for like a classic, a vintage classic rock rhythm tone, a really trebly, kind of mid-rangey thing without a lot of bottom end, almost like it has a high-pass filter on in the studio, or like you were playing through a little 4-watt amp. So again, for this, we've got the bass back and then the treble up, and you'll hear it just gets a great, really vintage rock and roll rhythm tone. All right, next, before we turn it all the way up, I do want to hit it with a pedal. And now today I'm going to use a Keeley Super Fat mod. Keeley and Supro work together. It seemed kind of appropriate. They go together like peas and carrots. So I'm going to play a clean tone with the Stratocaster and then hit it with a Super Fat mod to hear how it takes pedals. All right, folks, here we are. Let's turn this thing all the way up, and we're going to do it on all three modes. I'm going to use the SG Classic. We're going to start with the boost and the drive disengaged, and then we're going to kick on the boost and then kick on the drive. The volume and the master volume are all the way up, so you can really hear what this thing can do when you open it up. So that's it, folks. That is the Supro Delta King 12. Let us know what you think in the comments. Is this one that you have, that you want to have? There are also smaller versions of this amplifier, lower wattages with smaller speakers. Again, this is a graduation, or an evolution of the Blues King, which was an amp that I also absolutely love. A really great little thing in a similar vein, had some different features, different tones, but all in all, a very similar amplifier. Let us know what you think in the comments. I'm Jack Fossett. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.